My husband, Marcus, sneered as he hurled my final suitcase onto the rain-soaked driveway and slammed the mahogany door in my face. "You're nothing but dead weight, Jasmine," he shouted through the wood. "My grandfather is gone, and I'm the sole heir to a $90 million empire. I don't need a physical therapist for a wife anymore. I need a woman who matches my new tax bracket. Get off my property before I call the cops." I stood there in the downpour, trembling in my scrubs, watching the man I'd supported for 6 years obliterate my life in 6 minutes. He thought he'd won. He thought the $90 million was his. But Marcus forgot one thing. He never bothered to check the fine print of his grandfather's estate plan. And he certainly didn't know that the estate attorney was waiting for my call. Before I tell you how I took everything from him without lifting a finger, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to humble an arrogant man. My name is Jasmine, and I'm 36 years old. I work as a physical therapist specializing in geriatric rehabilitation in Phoenix, Arizona. For the last 4 years, I was the only person who cared for my grandfather-in-law, Samuel, while he battled aggressive Parkinson's and dementia. My husband Marcus was too busy waiting for him to die so he could cash out. It was a Wednesday night in October when my world imploded. I was driving home to our desert estate in Paradise Valley, after a brutal 14-hour shift at the rehabilitation center. My legs were aching inside my sneakers, and my head was throbbing. All I wanted was a hot bath and a few hours of sleep before I had to wake up and check on Pops. That's what I called Samuel. He'd been declining rapidly lately, and I was the one managing his medications, his diet, and his dignity. Marcus couldn't handle the reality of aging, so he stayed in the guest casita or went out to clubs with his crew. As I turned onto the long, winding driveway of the estate, the headlights of my 12-year-old Honda cut through the heavy monsoon rain. I squinted through the windshield, trying to understand what I was seeing on the front courtyard. There were shapes scattered across the gravel and cacti landscaping, lumps of fabric, boxes, and plastic bags soaking in the desert mud. I stopped the car and stepped out into the downpour. My heart dropped into my stomach. It was my clothes, my scrubs, my Sunday dresses, my shoes, my books, all thrown carelessly across the yard like trash. My vintage leather tote, the one Pops had given me for my birthday last year, was lying open in a puddle, its contents spilling out into the mud. I ran toward the front door, my hands shaking. I punched the code into the smart lock. 2793. It beeped red. Access denied. I tried again, thinking my trembling fingers had slipped. Access denied. I pounded on the heavy wood door. "Marcus, let me in. What's going on? It's freezing out here." The door clicked and swung open. Warm light spilled out onto the stone porch, contrasting with the cold rain biting at my skin. Marcus stood there, and the sight of him made my blood boil. He was wearing a silk robe that cost more than my car, holding a glass of amber liquid that I recognized immediately. It was the 30-year-old bourbon Pops kept locked in his study for special occasions. Marcus took a slow sip, swirling the expensive liquor in the glass while looking down at me with pure contempt. "You're home early," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "I thought you had another double shift wiping down old people." "Marcus, let me in," I said, stepping forward. "Why are my things on the lawn? And why are you drinking Pops's special bourbon? He hates when anyone touches his collection." Marcus laughed, a cold, cruel sound that echoed in the night air. "Pops doesn't hate anything anymore, Jasmine. Pops is dead. He passed away 3 hours ago while you were out adjusting walkers for strangers." The world stopped. The rain, the cold, the exhaustion, all of it faded into a singular point of grief. Pops was gone. The man who had treated me like a granddaughter when my own family disowned me for marrying Marcus. The man who sat with me in the sunroom drinking sweet tea and telling me stories about building his medical equipment empire from nothing. He was gone, and I wasn't there. I tried to push past Marcus to get inside, to go to Pops's room, but he blocked the doorway with his arm. "Don't take another step," he sneered. "You have no reason to be here. The old man is gone, and his body has already been moved to the funeral home. And since he's gone, this house and everything in it belongs to me." "Marcus, move," I said, my voice cracking. "I live here. This is my home." "Not anymore," he replied, taking another sip of bourbon. "You lived here because Pops had a soft spot for charity cases. He liked having free physical therapy around. But I'm the man of the house now. I'm the sole heir to the company, the real estate portfolio, and the $90 million. And frankly, Jasmine, you don't fit the aesthetic of a billionaire's lifestyle. Look at you. You look like the help. He looked me up and down, his eyes filled with disgust at my wet scrubs and messy hair. I realized then that he'd been planning this. He'd been waiting for the exact moment his grandfather took his last breath to cut me loose. You can't kick me out, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We're married, Marcus. This is a marital residence. You can't just throw me out in the rain in the middle of the night. Watch me, he said. I changed the codes. I notified security. You're trespassing. Suddenly, I heard a giggle from inside the house. A woman appeared behind Marcus, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her chin on his shoulder. It was Kendra. I knew who she was. Everyone in Phoenix knew who she was. She was 23 years old, an influencer who'd been hanging around the VIP sections of the clubs Marcus frequented. But that wasn't what made me gasp. She was wearing my robe. My favorite silk robe, the one I bought for our anniversary last year, hoping to spark some connection in our dead marriage. Babe, who's that? Kendra asked, looking at me with fake innocence, even though she knew exactly who I was. Is that the therapist you told me about? Yeah, Marcus said, leaning back into her embrace. Just the help. She was just leaving. You gave her my robe, I whispered, the humiliation burning hotter than the cold rain. You have a mistress in our house wearing my clothes on the night your grandfather died. Do you have no shame, Marcus? Shame is for poor people, Jasmine, Marcus spat. I'm rich now. I can do whatever I want, and what I want is for you to get off my property. I need my medication, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. My thyroid condition. You know I need my levothyroxine. They're on the nightstand in our bedroom. Just let me get my pills and I'll leave. Marcus laughed again. Buy new ones. You have a job, don't you? Oh wait, I canceled your access to the joint account 2 hours ago. Better ask for an advance on your paycheck. He pulled his phone from his robe pocket. Siri, call the gate security. Tell them we have an intruder at the main house. Marcus, please, I beg not for the marriage, but for my life. I'll go into a thyroid storm if I miss multiple doses. You know this. Pops drove me to the ER last year when I ran out. Please, just hand me the bottle. He looked at me with dead eyes, the man I'd shared a bed with for 6 years. The man I'd supported financially while he tried to launch failed business after failed business. That sounds like a you problem, Jasmine, he said. He stepped back and slammed the door. The sound of the heavy lock sliding into place echoed like a gunshot. I stood there, pounding on the door, screaming his name, screaming for my medication. But the house remained silent. 2 minutes later, I saw the flashing lights of the private security patrol vehicle coming up the driveway. These were men I knew, men I'd bake Christmas cookies for, men who waved at me every morning when I left for work. Officer Rodriguez stepped out of the car. He looked uncomfortable, refusing to meet my eyes. Mrs. Chen, he said, his voice low. Mr. Chen called. He said you're causing a disturbance. He wants you removed from the premises. Rodriguez, you know me, I said, tears mixing with the rain on my face. I live here. My medicine is inside. He locked me out. Please help me get my pills. I can't do that, ma'am, Rodriguez said, looking at the ground. He's the property owner now. He showed us the deed transfer his grandfather signed before passing. If he wants you gone, you have to go. If you don't leave voluntarily, I have to arrest you for trespassing. I looked at the house one last time. I could see Marcus and Kendra in the window of the master bedroom. They were toasting with champagne. In the room where I had cared for his dying grandfather just that morning, Marcus was celebrating his wealth with a stranger while his wife stood in the rain. I realized then that arguing was useless. Marcus had the power. He had the house, the security guards, and the illusion of authority. But he was drunk on power and greed. I walked back to my car, my shoes squishing in the mud. I gathered what wet clothes I could salvage from the lawn and threw them into the back seat. As I sat in the driver's seat, shivering uncontrollably, my chest beginning to tighten from the stress and the missed medication dose, I looked up at the window. Enjoy it, Marcus, I whispered. Enjoy the champagne and the robe, and the feeling of victory. Because you have no idea what Pops really thought of you. And you have no idea what he left for me. I started the engine and drove away from the mansion, leaving behind the life I thought I had. I had no money, no home, no husband. But as I turned onto the main road, heading toward the only place I knew would take me in at 2 in the morning. A strange feeling settled over me. It wasn't fear. It was clarity. Marcus had just started a war, and he had no idea that he was fighting the only person who knew where all the bodies were buried. I drove to the 24-hour pharmacy first, praying my own small savings account had enough for an emergency refill. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. I wasn't just grieving, Pops. I was grieving the years I wasted on a man who saw me as disposable. But grief would have to wait. Tonight was about survival. Tomorrow would be about revenge. I woke up to the harsh glare of a security flashlight beaming through the fogged-up window of my sedan. For a second, I forgot where I was. I reached out for Marcus, expecting the warmth of our Egyptian cotton sheets, but my hand hit the cold, hard plastic of the steering wheel. The reality crashed down on me like a physical blow. I was 36 years old. I had a doctorate degree. I was a respected physical therapist. And I was sleeping in the back seat of my car in the employee parking lot of the very rehabilitation center, where I helped people rebuild their lives every day. My neck was stiff, and my stomach growled with a hunger that felt more like nausea. I sat up, shivering, pulling my coat tighter around me. The first thing I did was reach for my phone. Maybe Marcus had sobered up. Maybe he realized he'd gone too far. But there were no missed calls from him, just a notification from the bank. I opened the app, my fingers numb from the cold. Access denied. Account frozen. Please contact the primary account holder. He'd actually done it. He'd cut me off completely. I checked my own small personal savings account. $94. That was all I had to my name because every other cent of my paycheck had gone into the joint account to pay for the mortgage and Marcus's credit card bills while he played entrepreneur. Panic started to rise in my throat, choking me. I needed a hotel. I needed food. I needed a shower before my shift started in 4 hours. I scrolled through my contacts, desperate. My parents had disowned me years ago when I married Marcus. I had no siblings. The only family I'd known for the last decade was Marcus's. I paused on Vanessa's name. She was Marcus's cousin, married to his younger brother. She was a wealthy white woman from Scottsdale who always looked at me like I was a stain on her designer furniture. But she was a mother. Surely she would understand that you don't leave family on the street. I pressed call. It rang 4 times before she picked up, her voice groggy and irritated. Hello? Who's calling this early? Vanessa, it's Jasmine, I whispered, trying to keep my voice from shaking. I'm so sorry to wake you. Marcus locked me out. He threw me out of the house last night. I'm sleeping in my car. I just need a place to shower and maybe sleep for a few hours, please. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the rustle of expensive sheets, then a cold, sharp laugh. Oh, Jasmine. I was wondering when you'd call. Marcus told us everything. Told you what? I asked, confused. That he got drunk and kicked his grieving wife out in the rain? He told us that you threatened him, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with condescension. He said you went crazy when you found out Samuel left everything to him. Look, I always knew you were only with him for the lifestyle. You should have known your place a long time ago. You're a therapist, Jasmine. You were never one of us. You were just hired help that Marcus decided to marry. Vanessa, please, I pleaded, tears stinging my eyes. I have nowhere to go. That sounds like a personal problem, she replied. Don't call here again, or I'll call the police for harassment. You gold-digging trash. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the screen blurring through my tears. Gold digger. The irony was so bitter it tasted like bile. If only they knew. If only they knew who really paid the bills. If only they knew who really cleaned up the mess while they were out living their perfect lives. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes, letting the exhaustion pull me under. The smell of the car's stale coffee and old upholstery faded away, replaced by the smell of antiseptic and lavender lotion. My mind drifted back to 4 years ago. The day Pops was diagnosed. The day Marcus stopped being a grandson and started being a vulture. I was in the master suite of the estate, but not the one Marcus and I shared. I was in Samuel's room. The heavy blackout curtains were drawn, shutting out the Arizona sun. The room smelled of sickness, that distinct medicinal scent that no amount of air freshener could mask. Samuel was trying to sit up, his frail arms shaking as he reached for the water glass. I was there in an instant, sliding my arm behind his back, supporting his weight. He'd lost 60 pounds in 4 months. The powerful businessman who built a medical equipment empire was now lighter than a child. I got you, Pops, I whispered, adjusting his pillows. Easy now. He took a sip, coughing as the water went down. He looked at me, his eyes sunken, but still sharp. Where is he, Jasmine? Where's my grandson? I hesitated. I hated lying to him, but the truth was too cruel. Marcus was supposed to be here hours ago to help me lift Samuel for his bed bath. But Marcus wasn't here. He's stuck in traffic, Pops, I lied, smoothing the blanket over his legs. Big meeting downtown. He feels terrible. Samuel let out a wheezing laugh. Traffic on a Sunday. You're a terrible liar, Jasmine. But you're a good woman. I turned away to wet the washcloth, hiding my face. I started the slow, careful process of cleaning him. I wiped his face, his arms, his chest. I changed his adult diaper, wiping away the indignity with as much grace as I could muster. This was the reality of $90 million. It wasn't champagne and parties. It was bed sores and vomit and the slow, painful fading of a life. And I did it alone every single day. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, thinking maybe Marcus was finally close. It was a text from him, a photo. He was holding a stack of poker chips, a cigar clamped between his teeth, a cocktail waitress leaning over his shoulder. The caption read, "Vegas baby, winning big for the family." He wasn't in a meeting. He wasn't in traffic. He was in Las Vegas, gambling away the allowance his grandfather gave him. While his grandfather lay dying in his own waste, I felt a hand on my wrist. Samuel was looking at the phone screen. He'd seen it. He's not coming, is he? Samuel asked, his voice barely a whisper. No, Pops, I admitted, my shoulders sagging. He's not. Samuel closed his eyes, a single tear tracking through the deep lines of his face. I failed him, Jasmine. I gave him too much and asked for too little. I raised a man who thinks the world owes him everything, and he owes the world nothing. It's not your fault, Pops, I said, squeezing his hand. Marcus makes his own choices. Samuel opened his eyes and looked at me with an intensity that frightened me. Listen to me, Jasmine. You've been more of a grandchild to me than the ones who share my blood. You cleaned me. You fed me. You listened to me when I was too weak to speak. They only see the bank accounts. You see the man. He gripped my hand harder, his strength surprising me. Don't let them break you. When I'm gone, they'll show their true faces. They'll try to crush you, but you're smarter than them. You're stronger. Promise me you won't let them walk over you. I promise, Pops, I said, thinking he was just talking out of delirium. He smiled a secret, knowing smile. Good, because I made sure they can't. I snapped back to the present. The sound of a car horn in the parking lot jolted me awake. The sun was rising, casting a gray light over the rehabilitation center. My body ached from sleeping in the car, but the memory of that day burned in my chest. Pops knew. He knew exactly who Marcus was, and he knew who I was. I checked my phone again. It was 7 in the morning. There was a new email notification. Sender, Marcus Chen. Subject, dissolution of marriage. I opened it, my breath hitching. It wasn't just an email. It was a legal attachment. A divorce petition filed electronically first thing this morning. I scrolled through the legalese, my eyes widening at the cruelty of it. Petitioner Marcus Chen requests sole possession of the marital residence. Petitioner claims all assets are separate property inherited. Respondent Jasmine Williams to receive zero spousal support. He wasn't just divorcing me, he was erasing me. He wanted to throw me away like a used tissue. Now that he'd secured the bag, then a text message popped up at the top of the screen. It was Marcus. A photo loaded slowly over the poor data connection. It was Marcus sitting in the driver's seat of a bright orange McLaren, the interior stitching matching his smug grin. He was at a luxury car dealership. The text read, "Happy Thursday, Therapist Jasmine. Just put the deposit down on my new toy. Since I'm feeling generous today, here's the deal. Sign the papers by noon and agree to leave with nothing, and I'll Venmo you $6,000. Enough for a deposit on a studio apartment in the hood where you belong. Don't fight me, Jasmine. You don't have the money for a lawyer, and I have 90 million reasons why I'll win." I stared at the picture of him, the man who missed his grandfather's physical therapy appointments because he had a hangover. The man who was buying a supercar 14 hours after his grandfather took his last breath. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was quiet. It was the sound of the last thread of love and loyalty I had for my husband, severing completely. The grief I'd been feeling, the heavy, suffocating sadness evaporated. In its place, a cold, hard rock of hatred formed in the pit of my stomach. $6,000. He thought that was my price. He thought he could buy my dignity for the price of one of his watch bands. I looked at his smiling face in the photo. He looked so confident, so secure, so stupid. He had no idea. He truly had no idea. I didn't reply. I didn't cry. I wiped my face with a wet wipe, fixed my hair in the rearview mirror, and put my scrubs back on. I had a shift to work. I had patients who actually needed me. But as I walked toward the rehabilitation center entrance, my phone buzzed one more time. It wasn't Marcus. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it, my voice flat. "This is Jasmine, Mrs. Chen. This is Benjamin Sterling, your grandfather-in-law's estate attorney." I stopped in the middle of the crosswalk. "Mr. Sterling," I said. "Marcus said you were handling the transfer of assets to him, Mr. Sterling." Let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Marcus says a lot of things, Mrs. Chen. Most of them are incorrect. I tried to reach him this morning, but he seems to be busy shopping for cars. He was supposed to be at the will reading tomorrow, but he told my secretary to just mail him the check." I stood straighter. "What do you need from me, Mr. Sterling?" "I need you to be in my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp," the lawyer said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Marcus needs to be there too. But frankly, you're the one I really need to see." Samuel left specific instructions. "And Mrs. Chen, yes? Don't sign anything Marcus sends you. Not a divorce paper, not a settlement, nothing. You're about to be a very busy woman." He hung up. I looked up at the gray sky, and for the first time in 24 hours, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who just realized she was holding a loaded gun. Marcus wanted a war. He wanted to treat me like a worthless employee. Well, he was about to find out that the employee had the keys to the safe. I walked into the rehabilitation center, my head held high. Let him enjoy his McLaren for one more day. Tomorrow, I was going to take the keys, the house, and the smile right off his face. The funeral of Samuel Chen wasn't a service. It was a performance, a spectacle designed to announce to the world that the king was dead and a new prince had ascended the throne. I parked my rusted sedan for blocks away in a public lot because I knew Marcus would have security checking the main gate. I walked the rest of the way, my heels clicking on the hot pavement, my old black dress clinging to me in the dry Phoenix heat. It was the only black dress I owned that still fit. I'd lost 20 pounds in the last 2 months, caring for Pops, running myself ragged while Marcus spent his nights at the club. The fabric was faded at the elbows, and the hem was fraying, but it was clean. It was respectful. As I approached the cathedral, the flash of cameras blinded me. News vans lined the street. Pops was a legend in this city, a man who built a medical empire from a single home healthcare van. Everyone wanted to pay their respects or at least be seen paying their respects. I tried to slip into the side entrance, hoping to find a quiet corner to grieve. My heart felt like a stone in my chest, heavy and cold. I just wanted to say goodbye to the man who'd been more of a grandfather to me than my own flesh and blood, but a massive hand blocked my path. I looked up into the sunglasses of a private security guard. He was built like a linebacker, and he didn't look friendly. "Name?" He grunted, holding a clipboard. "Jasmine Chen," I said, my voice quiet. "I'm the granddaughter-in-law." Samuel was my grandfather-in-law. The guard ran his finger down the list. He frowned. Then he tapped his earpiece. "I have a Jasmine here. Claims to be family. Copy." He looked back at me, his face impassive. "Sorry, ma'am." Mr. Chen gave us strict instructions. "The immediate family list is closed. You're not on it." I felt the blood drain from my face. Not on the list. I was his wife. I was the one who held Samuel's hand when he took his last breath. "Check again," I pleaded. "Please, I'm Marcus's wife." The guard shook his head. "Mr. Marcus Chen is arriving now with the grieving party. He listed himself as single on the protocol sheet. You need to step back behind the barricade with the public." Before I could argue, a sleek black limousine pulled up to the curb. The crowd of reporters surged forward, shouting questions. The rear door opened, and Marcus stepped out. He looked magnificent. I hated him for it. He was wearing a custom Armani suit cut perfectly to his frame, dark sunglasses hiding his eyes. He looked every inch the grieving billionaire. He turned and extended a hand into the car, helping a woman out. It was Kendra. She was wearing a black dress that was tasteful but cost more than my annual salary. She clung to Marcus's arm, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. They paused for the cameras, Marcus bowing his head solemnly, Kendra leaning into him for support. They looked like the perfect tragic couple on the cover of a magazine. The audacity took my breath away. He was parading his mistress in front of the entire city at his grandfather's funeral, while his wife stood behind a barricade with strangers. Marcus looked up then. Even through his sunglasses, I felt his gaze land on me. He said something to Kendra, then whispered to the security guard. The guard nodded and lifted the velvet rope just enough for me to squeeze through. Marcus grabbed my upper arm. His grip was painful, his fingers digging into my flesh through the thin fabric of my dress. He didn't look at me. He kept his face forward, smiling sadly for the cameras, while he hissed into my ear. "What are you doing here, Jasmine? I thought I made it clear you weren't welcome." "I came to say goodbye to Pops," I whispered, trying to pull my arm away. "Let me go, Marcus. You look like a beggar," he sneered, his voice low and venomous. "Look at that dress. It's pathetic. You're an embarrassment to the brand I'm building. I'm your wife, Marcus. Nobody knows you," he countered, dragging me toward the side door away from the VIP entrance. "Nobody cares about the therapist who changed the diapers. Today is about the legacy. It's about the future, and you're not part of it." He shoved me through the heavy oak door into the vestibule of the church. The air inside was cool and smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. "Listen to me and listen good," Marcus said, cornering me against a marble pillar. "You can stay, but you sit in the back, the very last row. If I see you anywhere near the front, if I see you trying to talk to the press or the board members, I'll have security throw you out so fast your head will spin. Don't let anyone know who you are. Today is the day I introduce myself to the elite as the new boss. I can't have a washed up, broke woman dragging down my stock value." He straightened his tie, smoothed his jacket, and walked away, leaving me trembling in the shadows. He rejoined Kendra, who was waiting by the main doors, and together they walked down the center aisle, heads held high. Accepting condolences from senators and celebrities, I waited until the procession started before I slipped into the sanctuary. I found a seat in the very last pew, tucked behind a large stone column. I was invisible, just another face in the crowd of hundreds. The service was beautiful and hollow. People who barely knew Samuel went up to the podium and told stories about his business acumen, his wealth, his power. Nobody talked about his laugh. Nobody talked about how he loved strawberry ice cream, or how he hummed old jazz songs when he was in pain. Marcus sat in the front row, front and center. He wiped away fake tears when the choir sang. He looked the part perfectly. Beside him sat his younger brother and his wife, Vanessa. She was wearing a wide-brimmed black hat that blocked the view of the person behind her. She looked bored, checking her watch every few minutes. Midway through the service, during a particularly long prayer, I saw Vanessa stand up. She whispered something to Marcus and made her way up the aisle, presumably heading to the restrooms in the vestibule. As she passed my row, she stopped. I tried to shrink into the wood of the pew, praying she would just keep walking. But Vanessa never missed an opportunity to kick someone when they were down. She turned and squeezed into my row. Even though there was plenty of room to walk past, she was holding a silver flask in her hand, the kind you sneak into events when you can't wait for the reception. "Oh, my God," she whispered, loudly enough for the rows in front of us to hear. "I didn't think you'd actually show up." "Please, Vanessa," I whispered, staring straight ahead. "Not now. Not here. You just don't get it, do you?" She hissed. "You're like a cockroach, Jasmine. We try to flush you out, and you just keep crawling back. Look at you. You look like you got dressed in the dark." She pretended to stumble. It was a clumsy, theatrical movement. Her hand jerked, and the open flask in her grip tilted. Dark red wine splashed across the front of my dress. It soaked instantly into the faded fabric, spreading across my chest and lap like a fresh wound. The smell of cheap alcohol filled the small space around us. "Oops," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Oh, dear. I'm so clumsy." She pulled a tissue from her purse and dabbed aggressively at my chest, pushing the stain deeper into the fabric. "Look at that," she said, smirking. "Now you look like a drunk. Probably for the best. It matches your desperate vibe." She dropped the dirty tissue into my lap. You should probably leave, she whispered. You smell terrible. Marcus would be mortified if he smelled this on you. Oh, wait. He already is mortified by you. She straightened her hat, smoothed her dress, and walked away, her heels clacking on the stone floor. I sat there, frozen. The cold wine seeped through to my skin. I could feel the eyes of the people around me. They were wrinkling their noses, whispering to each other. Who's that woman in the back? Is she drunk at a funeral? How disrespectful. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout that Vanessa had done this on purpose, that I was the widow, that I was the only one here who actually loved the man in the casket, but I did nothing. I sat still, my hands clenched in my lap until my knuckles turned white. I let the wine soak in. I let the judgment wash over me because Samuel had made me promise. On his deathbed, he'd gripped my hand and told me to be patient. He told me that they would show their true colors, and when they did, I needed to be ready. So I sat in the wet, sticky dress, and I watched. I watched Marcus give a eulogy about a grandfather he hardly spoke to. I watched him talk about carrying on the legacy of integrity and honor, and I memorized it all, every lie, every smirk, every cruelty. They thought they were burying me along with Samuel. They thought if they humiliated me enough, I would disappear, but they forgot that you can't shame a woman who has nothing left to lose. As the organ music swelled for the recessional, and Marcus walked past me with his chin high, not even glancing in my direction, I made a silent vow. This was their show. But the curtain call was mine. The sound of a champagne cork popping echoed through the foyer of the estate like a gunshot. I stood in the entryway, still wearing my wine-stained black dress, watching as my husband's funeral reception transformed into a grotesque celebration. The traditional repast meant for quiet reflection and sharing memories of the deceased had been hijacked. Marcus had replaced the soft jazz playlist with heavy EDM tracks that rattled the modern art on the walls. Waiters circulated with trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres that Pops would have hated. There was no comfort food, no familiar dishes, no soul. Marcus had erased the essence of his grandfather before the body was even cold. I watched from the shadows as Marcus climbed onto a leather ottoman in the center of the living room. He held a bottle of Dom Pérignon in one hand and a microphone in the other. His face was flushed with alcohol and the adrenaline of new money. Listen up, everyone, Marcus shouted, his voice booming over the music. Today we say goodbye to the old way of doing things. My grandfather built a nice little business with those medical vans. I'll give him that. But let's be honest, who wants to deal with bedpans in 2024? A ripple of laughter went through his entourage. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Pops had built those services with his bare hands. He'd helped thousands of elderly people maintain their dignity. We're leveling up. Marcus continued, gesturing wildly with the bottle. I'm talking expansion. I'm talking luxury medical concierge services. We're bringing Miami to Phoenix, baby. The crowd cheered. These weren't Pops's friends. These were Leach's people who'd never set foot in the house when Samuel was alive but now swarmed around the honeypot. I felt a wave of nausea. He was going to destroy it all. The legacy, the history, the community service that Pops had cherished more than his own life. I scanned the room, desperately looking for a friendly face. I needed to find Mr. Sterling. I knew the estate attorney would be here. He had to be witnessing this madness. I spotted him near the fireplace, looking grim and holding a glass of water like a shield. He was watching Marcus with eyes that burned with disapproval. I took a step toward him, but I never made it. A wall of bodies blocked my path. It was Marcus's crew, 3 men in ill-fitting designer suits who'd spent the last 6 years borrowing money from Marcus that I knew he would never get back. They formed a semicircle around me, cutting off my route to the lawyer. Look who crawled out of the woodwork, one of them sneered. It's Nurse Ratched, therapist, I corrected quietly. They laughed, clinking their glasses together. Man, look at her, another one said, pointing at the dark stain Vanessa had left on my dress. She looks like she got into a fight with a wine bottle and lost. You sure you belong in here, sweetheart? The help entrance is around back. Excuse me, I said, trying to push past them. I need to speak to Mr. Sterling. One of the men stepped in front of me, blocking my way. He was tall, with a gold chain that caught the light. Mr. Chen said no disturbances, he said, his voice dropping to a menacing register. And you look like a disturbance. Why are you even here, Jasmine? The ride is over. The ATM is closed. Marcus doesn't need a sponge anymore. I'm his wife, I said, my voice trembling with rage. For now, the man laughed. But we all see the upgrade over there. He gestured toward the front of the room where Kendra was holding court. She was laughing, her hand resting possessively on Marcus's arm. She looked radiant and expensive, a stark contrast to my disheveled appearance. You should have signed the papers when you had the chance, the man continued, leaning into my personal space. Now you're just embarrassing yourself. Look at you. You're wearing rags in a room full of riches. Do yourself a favor and disappear before security drags you out. I looked past them, trying to catch Mr. Sterling's eye, but the lawyer had turned away, cornered by another group of guests. I was trapped, isolated in my own home, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a nuisance to be discarded. Suddenly, the music cut out. A feedback screech from the microphone silenced the room. Marcus was standing on the raised hearth of the fireplace now, commanding the attention of every person in the room. He looked powerful. He looked manic. I have one more announcement, he bellowed, his eyes scanning the crowd. Today is a day of endings, yes, but it's also a day of new beginnings. He reached down and pulled Kendra up onto the hearth beside him. She giggled, feigning shyness as she smoothed her dress over her hips. For a long time, I felt stuck, Marcus said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality. Stuck in the past, stuck in obligations, stuck with people who didn't appreciate my vision. But now I'm free, and a king needs a queen who understands his worth. He dropped to one knee. The room gasped. I stopped breathing. He wasn't going to do this. Not here. Not at his grandfather's funeral. Kendra baby, Marcus said, producing a black velvet box from his jacket pocket. You've been down for me since day one. Will you marry me and help me run this empire? Kendra screamed a high-pitched sound of delight and nodded vigorously. Yes. Yes, baby. Yes. Marcus stood up and slid a massive diamond ring onto her finger. It was huge, gaudy, and undoubtedly paid for with credit that was about to be declined. The room erupted in applause. People were cheering, whistling, raising their glasses. I stood frozen in the back of the room, my heart shattering into a million pieces. It wasn't that I wanted him back. I loathed him, but the disrespect was suffocating. He was proposing to his mistress over his grandfather's grave, while his wife stood 20 feet away. Then Marcus saw me. His eyes locked onto mine over the heads of the cheering crowd. The smile on his face shifted. It became something darker, something cruel and predatory. He tapped the microphone. Hold on, everyone, he said, silencing the room again. We have an uninvited guest. The crowd turned. Hundreds of eyes followed his gaze until they landed on me. I stood alone, the circle of his friends having parted to leave me exposed. I held my head high, refusing to shrink away, but my insides were trembling. Well, Marcus said, his voice dripping with mock pity. If it isn't the grieving widow, Jasmine, I thought I told you to leave. You're bringing down the vibe. I didn't speak. I just stared at him, letting my silence be my testimony. Look at her, folks, Marcus continued, gesturing at me with the champagne bottle. This is what bitterness looks like. She's mad because the gravy train derailed. She's mad because she thought she could trap me with guilt. But you can't trap a lion, Jasmine. He laughed, and the room laughed with him, a sea of sycophants desperate to be close to his money. You know what? Marcus said, stepping down from the hearth and walking toward me. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, allowing him a clear path. He stopped 3 feet away from me, Kendra trailing behind him, smirking. I feel generous today, he said. I really do. I just got engaged. I'm worth $90 million. I should help the less fortunate. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip. He peeled off a few bills, 20s, a couple of 10s. It looked like about $300 total. He crumpled the bills in his fist and then tossed them at my feet. The money hit the expensive hardwood floor with a soft, humiliating sound. Here, he said, his voice loud enough for the back of the room to hear. Uber money. Take a ride back to whatever motel you're staying in. Get out of my house, Jasmine. You're trespassing on my future. The room was deadly silent. All eyes were on the money on the floor, and then on me. This was it, the final break. He'd stripped me of my home, my dignity, my status. He expected me to cry. He expected me to scream or attack him so he could have me arrested. Instead, I slowly bent down. My knees popped in the silence. I reached out and picked up the crumpled bills. My hand was steady. I smoothed them out one by one, stacking them neatly. I stood up and looked Marcus dead in the eye. I didn't look at Kendra. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked only at him. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice clear and calm, carrying through the silent room. "I'll put this toward the legal fees." Marcus's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Confusion flickered in his eyes, but before he could respond, I turned my back on him. I walked through the crowd. I didn't run. I didn't look down. I walked past Vanessa, who was watching with her mouth open. I walked past the security guards, who shifted uncomfortably. I walked out the front door, down the steps, and into the cool desert night air. I still had the $300 in my hand. It wasn't money to me. It was a receipt. It was physical proof of his cruelty, and as I walked toward my car, passing the row of luxury vehicles that belonged to his fake friends, I knew one thing for certain. He thought he'd just bought my disappearance. But he'd just bought his own destruction. I checked my watch. It was 8 p.m. I had 13 hours until the meeting with Mr. Sterling. 13 hours to prepare. 13 hours until the axe fell. I got into my car and locked the doors. I didn't go to a motel. I drove to the one place where I could think clearly, the one place where Marcus would never think to look for me. The 24-hour diner on Camelback Road where Pops used to take me for late night pancakes. When the pain kept him awake, I ordered coffee black and I waited because I knew Mr. Sterling would find me. He knew Pops's habits better than anyone, and sure enough, 20 minutes later, the headlights of a vintage Mercedes swept across the parking lot. The real meeting was about to begin. The fluorescent lights of the diner hummed with a low, electric buzz that matched the vibration in my exhausted nerves. It was 2 in the morning. The diner was mostly empty, just a construction worker nursing coffee in the corner and a couple of college kids sobering up over plates of hash browns. I sat in the corner booth, the vinyl sticking slightly to the back of my legs. My dress was still stained with red wine, a mark of shame that I wore like armor now. On the table in front of me sat a mug of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I stared out the window into the dark parking lot, watching the occasional car pass by on Camelback Road. I was homeless. I was a widow. I was the laughingstock of Phoenix high society thanks to my husband's performance at the repast. But strangely, I didn't feel afraid anymore. I felt like a coiled spring waiting to snap. A pair of headlights swept across the booth, blinding me for a second. A vintage Mercedes pulled into the spot right in front of the window. It was pristine black and imposing. I knew that car. I'd helped Pops polish the chrome on it. When his Parkinson's got too bad for him to do it himself, Benjamin Sterling stepped out. He was a tall man with silver hair and a posture that made his 72 years look like 55. He was wearing a trench coat over a 3-piece suit. Even at this ungodly hour, he looked impeccable. He opened the diner door, and the bell chimed. He didn't look around. He walked straight to my booth and slid into the seat opposite me. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He looked up at the waitress who was approaching with a pot of coffee. "I'll take the number 7, he said, his voice gravelly and deep. "Blueberry pancakes, extra butter. Bacon? Crispy. Coffee with 3 sugars. The waitress scribbled it down and walked away. I felt tears prick my eyes. That was Pops's order. Every Sunday after physical therapy sessions, before he got too sick to leave the house, he would bring me here and order exactly that. "You remembered?" I whispered. Benjamin looked at me, his eyes soft behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Samuel was my best friend for 45 years, Jasmine. I remember everything. And I remember that he told me you were the only person in the world who never asked him for a dime." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He placed it on the table between us, but kept his hand on it. "Marcus thinks he won today," Benjamin said quietly. "I heard about the spectacle at the house, the proposal, the money on the floor. It was disgusting, but it was predictable. He thinks he has the will," I said. "He told everyone the estate is his." Benjamin chuckled, a dry sound that had no humor in it. "Marcus thinks a lot of things. He thinks because he carries the Chen name, he carries the Chen character. But Samuel knew better. Samuel knew his grandson was rotten fruit from a good tree." The waitress returned with the coffee and the pancakes. Benjamin waited until she left before he leaned in closer, his demeanor shifting from old family friend to shark attorney. "Samuel didn't trust blood, Jasmine," he said, his voice dropping. "He trusted character. About 7 months ago, when Marcus started disappearing for days at a time, claiming he was closing deals in Las Vegas, Samuel got suspicious. He had me install cameras. My breath caught in my throat. Cameras? Where? Everywhere, Benjamin said. In the study, in the hallways, and most importantly, in his bedroom, the sick room. I felt a flush of heat. Oh God, he saw me changing him. He saw a granddaughter loving a dying man, Benjamin interrupted firmly. He saw you crushing his pills so he could swallow them without choking. He saw you reading to him at 3 in the morning, when the pain was too bad for him to sleep. He saw you singing those old songs to calm him down. Benjamin took a sip of his sugary coffee, his eyes never leaving mine. And he saw Marcus too. We have footage from 4 weeks ago, Jasmine. The night Marcus came home drunk after you'd gone to the pharmacy. Samuel was asleep. Marcus didn't check his grandfather's pulse. He didn't fix the blanket. He walked over to the dresser and took the vintage Rolex Samuel received when he opened his first clinic. He slid it into his pocket and walked out. I covered my mouth with my hand. He stole from his dying grandfather. He pawned it the next day, Benjamin said. We have the receipt. Samuel watched that footage the next morning. He cried, Jasmine. He cried because he realized his grandson wasn't just lazy, he was a thief. That was the day he called me to rewrite everything. Benjamin tapped the envelope under his hand. Marcus is walking into that office tomorrow expecting a coronation. He thinks we're going to read the last will and testament of Samuel Chen, dated 6 years ago. That will did leave everything to him. But Marcus is lazy. He never bothered to check if there were updates, and he certainly doesn't understand the difference between a will and a trust. He slid the envelope across the sticky table toward me. Open it. My hands trembled as I undid the clasp. I pulled out a heavy stack of documents bound in blue legal paper. The title at the top read, The Samuel Chen Irrevocable Living Trust. I looked up at Benjamin, confused. What does this mean? It means, Benjamin said, slicing into his pancakes, that 6 years ago, right after Marcus got his second DUI, Samuel moved every single asset he owned out of his personal name. The medical equipment company, the real estate portfolio, the investment accounts, the mansion you were just kicked out of, even the cars. He transferred ownership of everything into this trust. He pointed a fork at the document. When Samuel died, his personal estate was worth almost nothing. Maybe a few thousand in a checking account and some old clothes. That's what Marcus is going to inherit tomorrow. The contents of a closet. But the trust? I asked, my mind racing. Who controls the trust? Benjamin smiled, and for the first time, it was a genuine, predatory grin. Turn to page 6. I flipped the pages. My eyes scanned the dense legal jargon until I found the section labeled Beneficiaries and Trustees. Primary beneficiary, Jasmine Williams Chensel. Trustee, Jasmine Williams Cheney stared at my name, typed in bold letters. It didn't seem real. Sole trustee means you're the boss, Benjamin explained. You don't just get the money, Jasmine. You control the empire. You decide who gets paid. You decide who lives in the houses. You decide who runs the company. You have absolute power over every asset Samuel built. He sat back, wiping his mouth with a napkin. And because it's a trust, it's not subject to probate court. Marcus can't contest it. He can't freeze the assets. It's already yours. It became yours the second Samuel's heart stopped beating. While Marcus was throwing your clothes on the lawn, you technically already owned the grass he was standing on. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, a hysterical sound that I quickly swallowed. I own the house? You own the house, Benjamin confirmed. You own the deed. You own the mortgage note. You own the gate codes. And the divorce? I asked, remembering the email Marcus had sent. He wants me to sign away my rights to his inheritance. Benjamin laughed out loud this time. Let him file. In fact, sign the papers if you want. Since the inheritance is in a trust specifically in your name, it's not marital property. It's separate property. Even if you stay married, he can't touch it. But if you divorce him, he leaves with exactly what he has in his own name, which I happen to know is a mountain of credit card debt and a lease McLaren he can't afford. I looked down at the document again. $90 million. The power to crush the man who had tormented me. The power to evict Vanessa, the cousin who poured wine on me. Why didn't he tell me? I whispered. Why did he let me worry about money for medications? He wanted to protect you, Benjamin said softly. He knew, if Marcus found out before he died, Marcus would have made your life a living hell. He might have even tried to hurt Samuel to get the money sooner. Samuel wanted you to be safe. He wanted the transfer to be instant and irreversible. Benjamin reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They were heavy, old-fashioned iron keys. "These are the master keys to the estate," Benjamin said, "and this," he handed me a sleek black card, "is the corporate credit card for the trust. It has a limit of $7 million. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Go buy a new dress, Jasmine. Get your hair done. Walk into my office tomorrow morning looking like the CEO of a $90 million company. Don't walk in there like a victim. Walk in there like the boss." I took the keys. The metal was cold and heavy in my palm. I thought about Marcus laughing as he threw the money at my feet. I thought about Vanessa sneering at my stained dress. "I'm not just going to buy a dress," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I'm going to buy the whole damn city." Benjamin grinned. "That's the Jasmine Samuel loved." He stood up and buttoned his coat. "9 a.m. sharp, Jasmine. Don't be late. And bring the $300 Marcus threw at you. I have a feeling we're going to need it for the filing fee." He walked out of the diner, leaving me alone in the booth with a stack of papers that were worth more than the entire neighborhood. I picked up a piece of the crispy bacon from the plate he'd left untouched. It was salty and perfect, just the way Pops liked it. I took a bite. It tasted like victory. I sat in that booth for another hour, reading every page of the trust document. Every clause, every provision, every safeguard, Samuel had built into the structure. He'd thought of everything. He'd protected me from every angle. At T4 in the morning, I drove to the 24-hour luxury spa in Scottsdale, the kind of place I'd never dared enter before. I walked in wearing my wine-stained dress and handed them the black card. "I need everything," I said. "Hair, nails, makeup. And I need a personal shopper to bring me a suit. Price is no object." The receptionist looked at the card, swiped it, and her eyes widened when it cleared. "Right away. Mrs. Chen," she said, her tone shifting from skeptical to reverent in an instant. For the next 4 hours, I was transformed. My hair was cut, styled, blown out. My nails were shaped and polished. My makeup was applied by an artist who specialized in power looks. The personal shopper brought me 6 suits. I chose a charcoal gray power suit with a silk blouse the color of blood. It cost $8,000. I didn't blink. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the exhausted therapist in stained scrubs who'd been thrown out into the rain. She wasn't the grieving widow who'd been humiliated at the funeral. She was power. She was money. She was the boss. At 8:45 a.m., I pulled into the parking garage of Sterling and Partners in my old Honda. I didn't care that it looked out of place among the luxury cars. Tomorrow, I'd buy something better. But today, I had a war to win. I walked into the lobby, my heels clicking on the marble floor with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Marcus was already there, lounging in the waiting area with Kendra on his arm. He was wearing the same white linen suit from the funeral. He looked tired, hungover, arrogant. When he saw me, his jaw dropped. He didn't recognize me. For a full 3 seconds, he stared at the powerful woman in the expensive suit, trying to place her face. Then it clicked. "Jasmine?" he whispered, standing up so fast he knocked over his coffee. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at him. I walked past him, past the receptionist, straight to Benjamin Sterling's office. Behind me, I heard Marcus scramble. "Wait, Jasmine, wait. We need to talk." But I didn't wait. I didn't look back. I opened the door to the conference room where my future was waiting. It was time to take everything. The conference room at Sterling and Partners smelled of old money and mahogany. It was the kind of room designed to make you feel small, with floor to ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound legal volumes that no one had opened in 50 years, and a view of the Phoenix skyline that cost more than most people's annual salary. I was sitting in the reception area, watching through the glass walls as the circus arrived. They came in a convoy of Ubers because Marcus had likely maxed out his credit cards on the down payment for the McLaren he didn't actually own yet. Marcus led the pack. He was wearing a white linen suit that looked ridiculous in November, paired with loafers that had no socks. He walked with a swagger that took up the entire hallway. Hanging off his arm was Kendra. She was wearing a red dress that was entirely inappropriate for a legal proceeding involving a death. It was tight, short, and loud. She was snapping gum and looking at her phone. probably checking her Instagram engagement on the photo of the ring Marcus had bought with invisible money. Trailing behind them were his younger brother Ryan and his wife Vanessa. Ryan looked hungover, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. Indoors, Vanessa, however, looked ready for battle. She was wearing a designer suit that I knew was a knockoff because she'd bragged about buying it on a trip to Chinatown years ago. She was carrying a leather portfolio as if she were the one running the meeting. I could hear them through the glass. They weren't using their indoor voices. "We should definitely book Cabo for New Year's," Marcus was saying loudly, his voice echoing off the marble floors. "I saw this private villa on Instagram. 40,000 a week. Kendra needs a vacation, and I need to decompress after dealing with all this funeral stress. 40,000 is nothing," Ryan grunted. "You need a boat, bro. Pops had all that cash sitting in conservative investments. We need to liquidate and buy toys." "Floating toys," Vanessa chimed in, her voice shrill and demanding. "Don't forget about the house, Marcus. I already called a contractor. We're knocking down the wall between the kitchen and the living room in the guest casita. Ryan and I need more space if we're going to live there. And we need to get rid of that old man smell." They walked right past the receptionist without checking in. Marcus pushed open the heavy oak doors to the main conference room and threw his jacket over the back of the chair at the head of the table. "Where's the lawyer?" Marcus shouted. "I have a car dealership appointment at noon. Let's get this check signed so I can get on with my life." I watched as they settled in. Marcus put his feet up on the polished wood table. Kendra started taking selfies in the reflection of the window. Vanessa began rearranging the chairs so she could sit closer to Marcus, undoubtedly to whisper in his ear about renovations. They looked like vultures who'd already started feasting before the carcass was even cold. They were so confident, so sure of their victory. They had no idea that they were sitting in a trap. I checked my reflection in my compact mirror one last time. The woman staring back at me wasn't the exhausted therapist in stained scrubs who'd been thrown out into the rain. She wasn't the grieving widow who'd been humiliated at the funeral. Thanks to the black card Benjamin Sterling had given me, I'd spent the morning transforming myself. I was wearing a tailored charcoal gray power suit that cost $8,000. My hair was blown out sleek and straight. My makeup was flawless, covering the dark circles under my eyes. I was wearing the pearl earrings Samuel had left for me in the safety deposit box. I looked like money. I looked like power. I looked like the boss. I stood up and smoothed my jacket. It was time. I walked to the conference room doors and pushed them open. The heavy wood swung inward silently. The chatter in the room stopped instantly. 4 heads turned in my direction. For a second, there was silence. They didn't recognize me. They saw a woman in an expensive suit, carrying a Birkin bag and radiating authority. Then Marcus squinted. His feet dropped from the table with a thud. "Jasmine?" he asked, his voice cracking. I walked into the room, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. I didn't look at him. I walked to the chair at the opposite end of the table, the one directly facing the head chair Marcus had usurped. I pulled it out and sat down, placing my bag on the table with a deliberate thud. "What are you doing here?" Marcus demanded, his shock quickly replaced by his usual sneer. "Did you get lost on your way to the unemployment office?" Vanessa let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, my God, look at her. She's playing dress up. Did you rent that suit, Jasmine? You better hope you don't spill anything on it, or you'll never get your deposit back." I ignored her. I opened my leather folio and took out a gold pen. I uncapped it and set it next to my notepad. Marcus stood up, his face flushing red. "I asked you a question. What are you doing here?" "Security at the gate said you were banned. I'm here for the reading of the will," I said, my voice calm and ice cold. "The will?" Marcus laughed. "You're not in the will, Jasmine. Pops knew better. He knew you were just a gold digger waiting for a payout. Why do you think he left everything to me?" "You're wasting your time, maybe," Kendra chimed in, popping her gum. "She came to ask for her toaster back." "Did we throw out her toaster, babe? I think I saw it on the lawn." Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Or maybe she came to beg for a job. We're going to need a maid, Marcus, someone to scrub the toilets in the new wing. I mean, she's already used to cleaning up waste, right? That's what therapists do." They all laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound, a pack of hyenas cackling over their prey. Benjamin Sterling entered the room from a side door. He was carrying a single thin file folder. He walked to the middle of the table and sat down. He didn't look at Marcus. He looked at me and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Good morning, everyone, Benjamin said, his voice grave. About time, Marcus snapped. Kick her out, Benjamin. She's trespassing. This is a private family matter. Mrs. Chen is here at my invitation, Benjamin said, shuffling the papers in front of him. She's a necessary party to these proceedings. Marcus rolled his eyes. Fine. Let her stay. Let her watch me get rich. It'll be a good lesson for her. Maybe she can learn what success looks like. Benjamin put on his reading glasses. He looked over the rims at Marcus. Are we ready to proceed? He asked. Just read the damn paper, Marcus said, waving his hand dismissively. Skip the legal mumbo-jumbo. Just tell me the total. Is it 90 million? Or did the market go up? Benjamin cleared his throat. I will now read the last will and testament of Samuel James Chen, dated 6 years ago. 6 years ago, Marcus interrupted. That sounds right. That was before he got sick. Before he lost his mind and let this woman move in. Benjamin continued, ignoring the interruption. I, Samuel James Chen, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all prior wills and codicils. He paused and looked around the room. Article 1. I leave my collection of vintage medical textbooks to be divided equally between my grandsons, Marcus and Ryan. Marcus nodded. Okay, cool. I can sell those. Keep going. Article 2, Benjamin read. I leave my personal wardrobe, including all suits, shoes, and coats, to be donated to Goodwill, with the exception of my favorite fishing hat, which I leave to my brother-in-law. Marcus frowned. Okay, whatever. Get to the money, the bank accounts, the real estate. Benjamin turned the page. It was the last page, Article 3, regarding my liquid assets and financial holdings. Marcus leaned forward, greedy anticipation, sweating on his forehead. Vanessa gripped Ryan's arm. Kendra stopped chewing her gum. I hereby leave the sum of $2,000 to my grandson, Marcus Chen. Benjamin stopped reading. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus blinked. 2,000? You mean to million, right? Like 2.0 million. Or 20 million. Benjamin shook his head. No, $2,000. 1, 2, 0, 0, 0. Marcus stood up so fast his chair tipped over backward. What kind of joke is this? He shouted. $2,000? That doesn't even cover the champagne I bought for the funeral. Where's the rest of it? Where are the medical equipment profits? Where's the mansion? Where's the $90 million? Benjamin looked down at the paper. And I leave the sum of $2,000 to my grandson, Ryan Chen. Ryan slammed his fist on the table. This is bull. We know how much he was worth. Forbes listed him at 95 million last year. You're hiding it, Benjamin. You're stealing it. Benjamin looked up, his face completely impassive. This concludes the reading of the last will and testament of Samuel James Chen. The estate described in this document consists solely of his personal checking account, which contained $4,000 at the time of his death, and his personal effects. Marcus's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. He lunged across the table, grabbing the paper from Benjamin's hands. He scanned it frantically, his eyes darting back and forth. This is impossible. He screamed. He owned 40 medical equipment franchises. He owned the Paradise Valley estate. He owned the vacation home in Sedona. He owned the commercial building downtown. None of that is listed here. Why is none of that listed here? Vanessa stood up, pointing a manicured finger at Benjamin. You tricked him. You made him sign a fake will. We'll sue you. We'll have you disbarred. We know there's money. We've seen the lifestyle. Benjamin took off his glasses and folded them slowly. He placed them in his breast pocket. I didn't say there was no money, Mrs. Chen, he said, looking at Vanessa. I said there was no money in his estate. What does that mean? Marcus roared, throwing the will onto the floor. Money is money. If it's not in the estate, where is it? Benjamin turned his head slowly and looked at me. It's not in the estate, Marcus. Because 6 years ago, right after you were arrested for your second DUI, and right after Ryan dropped out of college for the 3rd time, your grandfather made a decision. He decided that he didn't want his life's work to be squandered on bottle service and bad investments. So? Marcus asked, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and dawning horror. So what did he do? He transferred every single asset he owned, Benjamin said, his voice ringing with finality. The medical franchises, the real estate, the investment portfolios, the intellectual property, the brand rights. He moved it all out of his personal name. Moved it where? Marcus whispered. He moved it into an irrevocable trust, Benjamin said. The Samuel Chen Legacy Trust. And who? Marcus choked out, grabbing the edge of the table to steady himself. Who is the beneficiary of the trust? Who controls it? Benjamin smiled. It was the same predatory smile he'd flashed in the diner. Why don't you ask the trustee, Marcus? She's sitting right across from you. Marcus turned his head slowly, like a rusted machine. He looked at me. He looked at the suit. He looked at the calm expression on my face. No, he whispered. No, not her. She's just a therapist. Pops hated her. He treated her like a servant. I stood up. I picked up my folio. I looked Marcus in the eye, and for the first time in 6 years, I didn't see a husband or a master. I saw a scared little boy who'd just broken his favorite toy. Hello, Marcus, I said softly. Did you bother reading the deed to the house before you kicked me out? Or were you too busy drinking bourbon? Benjamin Sterling reached into his briefcase and pulled out a remote control. He aimed it at the large screen on the wall. Marcus, I think you're confused about how the law works, Benjamin said, his voice calm and level. I didn't say the assets don't exist. I said they're not part of the probate estate. Do you understand the difference? Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making the water pitcher jump. I don't care about the difference, old man. I care about my money. If it's not in the will, where is it? Did you steal it? Did you hide it offshore? Benjamin sighed. Your grandfather knew you'd react this way, Marcus. That's why he structured his wealth protection plan 6 years ago. He moved the $90 million worth of assets into a trust. A trust is a separate legal entity, Marcus. It's like a corporation. It never dies. When Samuel died, the trust didn't die with him. The trust owns the mansion. The trust owns the 40 franchises. The trust owns the investment portfolio. And because the trust owns them, they don't go through probate court. They don't get listed in this will. Marcus stared at the diagram Benjamin had pulled up on the screen, his eyes crossing. So who owns the trust? He demanded, his voice rising to a shriek. Who holds the keys? Who signs the checks? Is it you, Benjamin? Are you trying to take my grandfather's empire for yourself? Benjamin shook his head. No, Marcus. I'm just the administrator. The power lies with the trustee. The trustee has absolute authority. They can sell the assets. They can keep the income. They can evict tenants. They can do whatever they want, because legally, they stand in Samuel's shoes. Then who is it? Marcus screamed, lunging forward so far his tie dipped into his water glass. Who is the trustee? Who controls my money? Benjamin pressed play on the remote. The screen flickered to life. It was a video recorded in this very office 7 months ago. Pops was sitting in the chair I was standing next to. He looked frail, his skin gray from the medication, but his eyes were blazing with intelligence. He looked into the camera lens as if he were looking right into Marcus's soul. Marcus, if you're watching this, I'm gone, Pops said, his voice raspy but firm. And knowing you, you're probably wearing a suit you can't afford, and shouting at Mr. Sterling about your inheritance. Marcus flinched as if his grandfather had reached out of the screen and slapped him. I want you to know why I did this. Son, Pops continued. I gave you every chance. I bailed you out of jail. I paid off your gambling debts. I bought you businesses that you ran into the ground because you were too lazy to show up before noon. I hoped you would grow up. I hoped you would become a man. Pops paused, coughing into a handkerchief. On screen, I saw him wipe his mouth and compose himself. But you didn't grow up, Marcus. You just got greedier. I saw you, son. I saw you steal my Rolex while I was sleeping. I saw you leave Jasmine to clean up my mess while you went to parties. You broke my heart, Marcus. You proved to me that if I gave you this money, you'd destroy everything I built in a year. Marcus was shaking his head, tears of rage streaming down his face. Turn it off, he yelled. Turn it off. I didn't turn it off. So I'm leaving it to the only person who ever loved me for me, Pops said, a small smile touching his lips. Jasmine. She's the granddaughter I wished I had. She has the strength you lack. She has the heart you threw away. She's the trustee, Marcus. She owns it all. If you want a dime, you have to ask her. And frankly, I hope she gives you nothing. You need to learn how to work for the first time in your life. Goodbye, son. I hope you find your way, but you won't find it with my money. The screen went black. For a moment, there was total silence in the room. The only sound was Marcus's heavy breathing. He looked like a cornered animal. His face was a mask of pure hatred. The reality was sinking in. The McLaren, the yacht, the parties, it was all gone. It had never been his. You witch, Marcus screamed. You poisoned him against me. You manipulated a dying old man. He lunged. It happened fast. Marcus scrambled over the table, scattering papers and water glasses. His hands were clawed, reaching for my throat. His eyes were wide and white. Jasmine, look out, Benjamin shouted. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch because I knew something Marcus didn't. Two massive men in dark suits stepped out from the shadows near the door. They were private security hired by the trust. They moved with the speed of professionals. Before Marcus could touch me, one of the guards caught him midair. He slammed Marcus onto the conference table face first. The sound of air leaving Marcus's lungs was satisfyingly loud. The second guard grabbed his arms and pinned them behind his back. Get off me, Marcus wheezed, struggling against the weight of the man on his back. I'm Marcus Chen. I own this building. You don't own anything, the guard said, twisting Marcus's arm until he yelped. Vanessa screamed. She jumped up from her chair, knocking it over. Oh, my God, you're hurting him. Stop it. Jasmine, tell them to stop. He's your husband. I looked at Vanessa. She was trembling, clutching her knockoff bag. She looked terrified. He's not my husband, I said coolly. He's an intruder who just attempted to assault the trustee of the Samuel Chen estate. I walked around the table until I was standing right in front of Marcus's face, which was pressed against the polished wood. You wanted to throw me out, Marcus, I whispered, leaning down so only he could hear. You wanted to leave me homeless. You wanted me to beg. I straightened up and turned to Vanessa. And you? I said, my voice hardening. You poured wine on my dress at the funeral. You laughed when Marcus told me to take an Uber. You told me I was a stain on this family. Vanessa swallowed hard. Jasmine, we were just stressed. It was a joke. We're family. Family? I repeated. That's funny, because I distinctly remember you telling me I was just the help. I picked up a document from the table. It was a property deed. You mentioned earlier that you changed the locks on the guest casita, I said. You said you were going to knock down walls. You said you needed to get rid of the old man smell. Vanessa nodded eagerly. Yes. We just wanted to fix it up for the family. Well, I have some news for you, Vanessa, I said, tapping the document against my palm. The guest casita isn't part of the main mansion deed. It's a separate parcel. And guess what? It's owned by the trust. Vanessa's face went gray. Which means, I said, smiling, I'm your landlord. And as your landlord, I'm evicting you. What? Vanessa gasped. You can't do that. We live there. All our stuff is there. You're squatters, I corrected her. You have no lease. You pay no rent. And you just assaulted the property owner. I looked at my watch. It was 10:30 a.m. I'm giving you 24 hours to vacate the premises. If your belongings aren't out by 10:30 tomorrow morning, I'll have the sheriff set them on the curb just like Marcus did to my clothes. But where will we go? Vanessa wailed. We have nowhere to go. Ryan doesn't have a job. That sounds like a you problem, I said, echoing Marcus's words from the nights before. Marcus roared against the table, trying to lift his head. You can't do this, Jasmine. That's marital property. Even if it's in a trust, the income is marital assets. I'm your husband. Half of what you have is mine. I'll sue you. I'll drag this out in court for years. I'll take half of every dime you get. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. I walked back to my purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was stained with coffee and wrinkled from being in my pocket. It was the email Marcus had sent me yesterday morning, the divorce petition. You really should read things before you send them. Marcus, I said, holding the paper up so he could see it with his one free eye. What is that? He grunted. This is the divorce petition you filed yesterday morning, I explained. Specifically, I want to draw your attention to Section 4. Paragraph B. I read aloud. Petitioner Marcus Chen asserts that all assets held by either party, including future inheritances and trust distributions, are to be considered separate property and not subject to division. Petitioner waives all rights to spousal support and requests that respondent Jasmine Williams Chen waive all rights to his separate property. I dropped the paper next to his face. You were so afraid I would take your imaginary $90 million that you legally waived your right to any of my actual $90 million. You defined inheritance as separate property, Marcus. You signed it. You filed it. It's a matter of public record. I leaned in close. Thank you for forcing me to sign this yesterday, I whispered. It saved me a fortune in legal fees. Benjamin Sterling let out a loud cough to hide a laugh. I think we're done here, Benjamin said, standing up. Guards, please remove Mr. Chen from the building. If he returns, call the police. The guards hauled Marcus to his feet. His white suit was rumpled, and his nose was bleeding from where it had hit the table. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and confusion that was delicious to witness. Jasmine, wait, he pleaded as they dragged him toward the door. Kendra, baby, tell her we can work this out. I looked at Kendra. She was standing by the window, holding her purse tight. She looked at Marcus, then she looked at me. She looked at the expensive suit I was wearing and the power I held in the room. She took the gaudy ring off her finger and dropped it on the table. It landed with a hollow clink. I think I'm going to go, she said, her voice flat. This looks messy, and you're broke, Marcus. I don't do broke. She walked out the door without looking back, her heels clicking on the marble floor until the sound faded into nothing. Marcus screamed as the guards dragged him into the hallway. His voice echoed through the building, fading as the elevator doors closed. Vanessa and Ryan scurried out after him, looking like rats fleeing a sinking ship. I stood alone in the conference room with Benjamin. The silence was heavy but peaceful. I looked at the portrait of Samuel hanging on the wall. He looked stern, but I swear his eyes were twinkling. I hope I did okay, Pops, I whispered. Benjamin put a hand on my shoulder. You did more than okay, Jasmine, he said. You cleaned house just like he asked. I picked up the master keys to the estate and dropped them into my purse. Let's go get some real food, I said. I know a place that serves pancakes the way Pops like them. Benjamin smiled. Lead the way, Mrs. Chen. You're the boss now. 3 months is a long time when you're watching your life implode from the inside of a jail cell. Marcus didn't go quietly. 3 weeks after the will reading, he tried to force the gate at the estate. He was drunk, screaming that it was his house, that I was a thief. The new security team didn't hesitate. They had him pinned on the hot asphalt before he even got halfway up the driveway. The police found bolt cutters in his passenger seat. That, combined with the violation of the restraining order, was enough to deny him bail. But the criminal charges were just the beginning of his nightmare. The creditors swarmed like locusts. The McLaren dealership sued for breach of contract and fraud. His credit cards defaulted one by one. He went from a man who thought he was worth $90 million to a man who couldn't afford a collect call. Kendra was long gone. She'd blocked his number before she even left the parking lot that day at the lawyer's office. Rumor had it she was already dating a professional basketball player in Los Angeles. Vanessa and Ryan weren't faring much better. They were evicted from the guest casita exactly 24 hours after the meeting. I heard through the grapevine that they moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a complex that had seen better days. The walls were thin, and the neighbors complained about their screaming matches. Vanessa had to get a job as a receptionist at a dental office. Ryan was working shifts at a warehouse. The renovation plans, the yacht dreams, the high society aspirations all evaporated, leaving behind the bitter residue of their own entitlement. I parked my car in the visitor lot of the county jail. I didn't have to be here. My lawyer advised against it, but I needed to see it. I needed to see the end of the story with my own eyes. I walked through the security checkpoints, my heels echoing on the linoleum floors. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. I sat down in the booth and waited. When they brought Marcus out, I almost didn't recognize him. The white linen suit was gone, replaced by a faded orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His head was shaved. He'd lost 30 pounds. He looked small. He looked defeated. He sat down and picked up the heavy black receiver. I picked up mine. Jasmine, he said, his voice cracking. Thank God you came. You have to get me out of here, please. It was a mistake. I was grieving. I wasn't in my right mind. I watched him through the scratched plexiglass. I looked for the man who had thrown my clothes on the lawn in the rain. I looked for the man who had laughed while his friends mocked me at the funeral. He was gone. All that was left was this pathetic creature begging for a lifeline. I'm not here to get you out, Marcus, I said, my voice calm and steady. I'm here to say goodbye. Jasmine, please, he sobbed, tears tracking through the grime on his face. I'm your husband. We were happy once. You can't leave me in here. I'll do anything. I'll sign anything. Just pay the bail. You have the money. It's nothing to you now. It's not about the money, I said, leaning closer to the glass. It's about the principle. You called me worthless, Marcus. You called me a parasite. You said I didn't fit your aesthetic. Well, look at us now. I gestured to my reflection in the glass, crisp, professional, and powerful, and then to him, broken and caged. I'm running the company, Marcus. Profits are up 20% this quarter. We opened 3 new locations last month. The employees are happy. The patients are happy. It turns out the worthless therapist knows how to take care of people better than the businessman ever did. Marcus stopped crying. His face twisted into a mask of ugly desperation. It's my money, he hissed. It's my grandfather's money. You stole it. Your grandfather gave it to the person who loved him. I corrected him. He gave it to the person who stayed when everyone else left. You abandoned him, Marcus. You stole from him. You lost. I stood up. I just wanted you to know that the house looks beautiful, I said. I planted new desert flowers in the front courtyard. And I finally got rid of the smell in the guest casita. It smells like fresh paint and new beginnings now. The rescue dogs love it. Dogs? Marcus asked, confused. The rescue dogs, I said, smiling. The casita is full of them. They're much better tenants than Vanessa and Ryan. They're grateful. I hung up the phone. Marcus was shouting something, slamming his hand against the glass, but I couldn't hear him. I didn't want to hear him. I turned my back on him and walked out of the room. I walked out of the jail and into the bright Phoenix sunshine. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with fresh air. It was over. The chapter was closed. I drove to the cemetery. It was a beautiful day. The sky was a brilliant blue, with high white clouds. I parked and walked up the hill to the family plot. It was peaceful here. The noise of the city was just a distant hum. I knelt in front of the marble headstone. Samuel James Chen, beloved grandfather and mentor. I placed a bouquet of white orchids on the grass. They were his favorite. I reached out and traced the letters of his name with my finger. I did it, Pops, I whispered. I cleaned house just like you asked. I sat there for a long time, just enjoying the silence. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the fear. It had all forged me into something new. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a leader. I was a woman who knew her own worth. I didn't keep all the money for myself. I didn't buy a yacht or a private island. I kept the house because it was home, but I lived simply. I used the trust to expand the business, to create jobs, to help the community. I started a scholarship fund for physical therapy students who wanted to specialize in geriatric care but couldn't afford it. I called it the Jasmine and Samuel Chen Grant. I wanted my name next to his. I wanted the world to know that we were the team that mattered. I stood up and brushed the grass from my knees. I adjusted my blazer. I had a board meeting at 2. I had decisions to make. I had an empire to run. I walked back to my car, my head held high. I was Jasmine Chen. I was 36 years old. I was a black woman in America who had started with nothing and ended up with everything, and I had done it without losing my soul. I unlocked my car, not the old Honda anymore. I'd bought myself a tasteful silver Tesla. Nothing flashy, just reliable and efficient. Like me. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked tired, but I looked strong. I looked like a woman who had walked through fire and came out made of steel. I started the engine and drove away from the cemetery, leaving the dead to rest, and the past where it belonged. The road ahead was open. And for the first time in a long time, I was the one behind the wheel. 6 months after the will reading, I stood in the boardroom of Chen Medical Solutions, looking out at the Phoenix skyline. The sun was setting, painting the desert mountains in shades of gold and purple. Behind me, 25 employees sat around the conference table. These weren't Marcus's fake friends or social climbers. These were real people, managers, technicians, nurses, administrators, people who had worked for Samuel and believed in his vision. I want to thank you all for your hard work this quarter, I said, turning to face them. We've not only met our goals, we've exceeded them. Patient satisfaction is at an all-time high. Employee retention is up 40%. We're making a difference in people's lives, and we're doing it the right way. There was applause. Genuine applause. These people respected me. They trusted me, not because of my name or my wealth, but because I'd earned it. After the meeting, I walked back to my office. It used to be Samuel's office. I'd kept most of his things, the vintage medical textbooks, the old photographs, the fishing hat hanging on the coat rack. On my desk was a framed photo. It was taken 2 years ago. Samuel and I were in the sunroom of the estate. He was sitting in his wheelchair, and I was beside him, holding his hand. We were both laughing at something ridiculous the physical therapist had said. I picked up the frame and smiled. "We did good, Pops," I said. "We did real good." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Benjamin Sterling. "Dinner tonight? I'm buying. You pick the place." I texted back. "The diner on Camelback. Blueberry pancakes. Your usual order." He replied with a laughing emoji. I gathered my things and headed out. As I walked through the office, I saw people working late not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They believed in what we were building. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. As I walked to my car, I passed a wall with framed photos of the company's history. There was a new photo now, added just last week. It was me, standing in front of the newest Chen Medical Solutions location. I was cutting the ribbon. I was smiling. I looked powerful. I looked happy. Underneath the photo was a plaque, Jasmine Williams Chen, CEO and trustee, carrying forward the legacy. I stood there for a moment, taking it in. I thought about Marcus, sitting in his jail cell, wondering where it all went wrong. I thought about Vanessa, answering phones at a dental office, bitter about the life she thought she deserved. I thought about all the people who had underestimated me, who had treated me like I was invisible. They had all made the same mistake. They confused kindness with weakness. They confused service with servitude. They thought that because I cleaned up messes, I was somehow less than them, but they were wrong. The people who clean up messes are the strongest people in the world. They're the ones who see what needs to be done and do it without complaining. They're the ones who show up when everyone else leaves. Samuel knew that. That's why he chose me. I got in my car and drove toward the diner. The Phoenix night was clear and cool. The city lights twinkled like stars. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who slept in her car in a hospital parking lot, the woman who was humiliated at a funeral, the woman who had every reason to give up. She would be proud of who I'd become. As I pulled into the diner parking lot, I saw Benjamin's vintage Mercedes already parked. Through the window, I could see him sitting in our usual booth, reading a newspaper, waiting for me. I walked inside. The bell above the door chimed. Benjamin looked up and smiled. "Mrs. Chen," he said, standing to greet me. "Right on time. Always," I said, sliding into the booth. The waitress came over. "The usual?" she asked. "The usual," I confirmed. "Blueberry pancakes. Extra butter. Bacon. Crispy. Coffee with 3 sugars. Just the way Pops liked it." As I sat there, waiting for the food, I realized something profound. The most powerful lesson from my journey wasn't about money or revenge. It was about character. Marcus and his family believed that their lineage and their loud voices gave them power. But they were spiritually bankrupt. My quiet strength, my honesty, my genuine concern for Samuel, those were the investments that yielded the highest returns. You can't build a lasting legacy by mistreating others. True power isn't about shouting the loudest or flashing new money. It's about quietly preparing, knowing your worth, and showing up even when the world tries to push you aside. Samuel saw that in me. He saw past the scrubs and the modest paycheck. He saw a woman who loved him for who he was, not what he had. And that love, that simple, genuine care ended up being worth $90 million. But more importantly, it was worth knowing that I'd done the right thing, that I'd honored a good man's memory, that I'd turned his legacy into something even greater. The pancakes arrived. They were perfect. Golden and fluffy, with butter melting into every layer. I cut a piece and took a bite. It tasted like victory. It tasted like justice. It tasted like home. Benjamin raised his coffee cup. "To Samuel," he said, "and to the woman who proved him right." I raised my cup and clinked it against his. "To Pops," I said, "the man who taught me that character is the only currency that truly holds value." We ate in comfortable silence. Two people who had fought a war and won. Outside, the desert night stretched out before us, vast, beautiful, and full of possibility. I was Jasmine Chen. I was a black woman who had been thrown away like trash and had risen like a phoenix. I had walked through fire, and I had emerged made of steel, and I was just getting started. if you believe that honesty is always more important than entitlement. Hit the like button and subscribe to Honey Revenge for more stories where justice prevails, character over everything. Always.